Billionaire sponsors Black Scavenger Boy's stray dog shelter, unaware the pup saved his son. This is a private charity gala, son. You and that mutt need to leave immediately. I'm not leaving until Mr. Harrison knows what his son and this mutt have in common. The security guard towered over 12-year-old Marcus Jenkins, his hand firmly gripping the boy's shoulder. Marcus stood his ground in the gleaming hotel ballroom entrance, clutching the leash of a one-eared German shepherd mix. Around them, wealthy guests in tuxedos and evening gowns stared and whispered. A few took out their phones, recording the confrontation. "Listen, kid," the guard hissed, lowering his voice. "Mr. Harrison is about to receive a humanitarian award. This is a $10,000 a plate dinner. You can't just walk in here off the street." Marcus lifted his chin, his eyes locked on the stage where Richard Harrison, CEO of Harrison Enterprises and one of the richest men in America, was preparing to give his acceptance speech. "That man's son would be dead if it wasn't for Hero," Marcus said, patting the dog's head. "And now he's trying to shut down our shelter." The guard's radio crackled. "Jenkins to control. I've got a situation at the east entrance." Young trespasser but at that moment Richard Harrison himself glanced toward the commotion. His eyes met Marcus's across the ballroom. For a moment the billionaire's composed facade cracked, showing a flash of recognition and fear. "That's him," Marcus whispered to Hero. "That's the man who wants to take everything away." The security guard tightened his grip. "That's it. You're coming with me, but let's go back to how this all started." It was just 3 days earlier when Marcus was making his usual rounds through Westside Park. Marcus Jenkins woke before dawn, as he did every morning. The summer sun was just beginning to lighten the sky outside his bedroom window in the small apartment he shared with his grandmother, Alois. From the corner of his room came the soft whine of anticipation from Hero, his faithful companion. I know," Marcus whispered, careful not to wake his grandmother who needed her rest. "Time for our rounds." He dressed quickly in worn jeans and a faded NASA t-shirt, a cherished gift from his father before he'd been deployed overseas with his National Guard unit 6 months earlier. Marcus filled his backpack with the essentials: several Ziploc bags of dog food, a couple of old water bottles, basic first aid supplies, and a small notebook. By 5:30 a.m., Marcus and Hero were on their familiar route through Westside Park. This neglected stretch of land had become a dumping ground for unwanted dogs in the neighborhood. For the past year, Marcus had appointed himself their unofficial guardian. "Morning, Rusty," Marcus called softly to the old retriever mix who emerged from behind the abandoned recreation center. The dog trotted over, tail wagging. "Breakfast time, old man." Marcus poured some kibble into a small pile and checked Rusty's paw, which had been injured the previous week. "Looking better," he murmured, making a note in his book. Hero stayed patiently at Marcus's side as they continued their rounds, visiting 4 more dogs that had become regulars in Marcus's care network. Each had a name, a story, and a place in the boy's methodical record-keeping system. As the sun climbed higher, Marcus headed to his makeshift shelter, a cluster of cobbled-together dog houses behind the old community garden where Mrs. Washington, an elderly neighbor who remembered the civil rights movement firsthand, had given him permission to use the space. "Your grandfather would be proud," she'd told him, referring to Marcus's late grandfather who had marched with Dr. King in '63. "Taking care of God's creatures when nobody else will. That's what community is about." The shelter currently housed 3 dogs that Marcus was actively trying to find homes for: Daisy, a gentle beagle mix; Max, an energetic terrier; and the newest arrival, a timid chihuahua he'd named Penny. Each had been abandoned, and each had slowly learned to trust again under Marcus's patient care. "We're going to need more food soon, guys," Marcus told them as he freshened their water bowls. His small allowance and the occasional $5 his grandmother could spare only went so far. He'd been collecting bottles and cans for the deposit money, but it was never enough. As Marcus tended to his charges on the other side of town, in the exclusive Hillcrest neighborhood, 16-year-old Tyler Harrison slammed the door of his father's Tesla and stormed toward the immaculate mansion he called home, but rarely thought of as such. "Tyler, we weren't finished with our conversation," Richard Harrison called after his son, emerging from the luxury vehicle in his perfectly tailored suit. "Yes, we were," Tyler shot back, not bothering to turn around. "You decided everything already, like always." Richard caught up to his son at the front door. At 48, the CEO of Harrison Enterprises still maintained the athletic build of his college rowing days, though touches of gray now peppered his temples. "This isn't about what I want," Richard said, lowering his voice as their housekeeper opened the door. Military school would give you structure, discipline. What it would do, Tyler interrupted, is get me out of your way. Isn't that what this is really about? The great Richard Harrison can't have a screw-up for a son. Bad for the company image. Richard's jaw tightened. That's not fair, Tyler. I'm trying to help you. These incidents keep escalating. The drinking, the parties, that stunt with the car, Mom would have understood, Tyler muttered, then immediately regretted it when he saw the flash of pain cross his father's face. 3 years had passed since Catherine Harrison's death from cancer, but the wound remained raw, a chasm between father and son that seemed to widen with each passing month. "Dinner is at 7, Richard said finally, his voice once again measured and controlled. "Please be there." Tyler didn't respond, taking the sweeping staircase 2 steps at a time to his room, where he locked the door and fell onto his bed. On his nightstand stood a photo of his mother, laughing on a beach somewhere, her arms wrapped around a much younger, happier version of Tyler. "He's sending me away, Mom," Tyler whispered to the picture. "He doesn't even want to try anymore." His phone buzzed with a text from his best friend, Jake. "Still on for the reservoir tonight? Got something special planned." Tyler hesitated for only a moment before typing back, "I'm in." That evening, as Richard sat alone at the massive dining table, Tyler's empty chair across from him, he checked his watch for the 3rd time. 7:45 p.m. His son had made his point, as usual. The housekeeper appeared at his elbow. "Would you like me to keep Mr. Tyler's dinner warm, sir?" Richard waved his hand dismissively. "No need, Mrs. Chen. I'm sure he's made other arrangements." He returned to his meal and the company report on his tablet, trying to ignore the hollow feeling that had become his constant companion. Meanwhile, Marcus sat at his own dinner table with his grandmother, a simple meal of spaghetti between them. "How are your dogs doing?" Eloise Jenkins asked, her kind face creased with the wisdom of her 72 years. "They're okay," Marcus replied, twirling pasta around his fork. "But we're almost out of food again, and Daisy might need to see a vet." "I think she's got an ear infection," Eloise sighed. "Baby, you know we can't afford a vet bill right now, not with your daddy's deployment checks being what they are." "I know, Grandma," Marcus said quickly. "I've been reading up on it. There might be some home remedies we can try." Eloise studied her grandson with a mixture of pride and concern. "You've got the biggest heart of anyone I know, Marcus Jenkins, just like your granddaddy." She reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "But you can't save them all, you hear me?" "I can try," Marcus replied with a small smile. After dinner, as Marcus helped with the dishes, the evening news played on their small television. A reporter stood outside an elegant venue. "Harrison Enterprises announced another record quarter today," the reporter said, "with CEO Richard Harrison set to receive the City Humanitarian Award this Saturday for his company's charitable foundation work." Harrison, whose net worth is estimated at over $4 billion, has donated millions to. Eloise snorted. "Humanitarian? That man wouldn't know real charity if it bit him on his designer pants. Those rich folks just donate to get their names on buildings and their faces on TV." Marcus watched the screen as it showed Richard Harrison emerging from a sleek building, surrounded by aides. "Maybe he could help with the shelter," Marcus mused. "His foundation must have millions." Eloise gave her grandson a gentle but knowing look. "People like that don't see people like us, baby. They live in a different world." As the evening deepened, Tyler Harrison slipped out of his bedroom window and down the custom stone facade of his family's mansion, a route he'd perfected over the past year. Jake was waiting in his Jeep at the end of the block, engine running. "Your old man catch you?" Jake asked as Tyler climbed in. "Doesn't matter," Tyler replied, reaching for the backpack between them. "What you bring?" Jake grinned, revealing a bottle of vodka. "Only the best. Oh, and something new too. My cousin got it from some college guys." Tyler's stomach tightened slightly at the sight of the small plastic bag of pills, but he nodded anyway. "Reservoir, then?" "You know it. The others are meeting us there." The reservoir was an old water retention basin on the outskirts of town, technically off-limits but a popular spot for local teens. By the time Jake parked among the trees, Tyler could see the glow of a small bonfire and hear the laughter of their friends. For the next hour, Tyler did his best to lose himself in the moment, the burn of alcohol, the pounding music from someone's portable speaker, the hollow laughter. But the argument with his father lingered, a shadow he couldn't shake. "Come on, man," Jake nudged him, holding out one of the pills. "This'll take the edge off." Tyler hesitated, then took it. "Whatever," he muttered, swallowing it with a swig of vodka. 30 minutes later, the world had taken on a strange, pulsing quality. Sounds were both sharper and somehow distant. Tyler found himself wandering away from the group, drawn to the dark water of the reservoir. "Hey, where are you going?" someone called, but Tyler didn't turn back. He followed the shoreline, his steps becoming less steady. The reflection of the half-moon rippled on the water's surface. In his altered state, it seemed to beckon him. Without fully realizing what he was doing, Tyler began to climb the maintenance structure that jutted out over the deepest part of the reservoir. The metal was slick with evening dew. Tyler's foot slipped, and for a heart-stopping moment, he teetered on the edge. Then he caught himself and laughed, the sound echoing across the water. This was exactly what he needed to feel something, anything. The danger was exhilarating. He edged out further onto the metal platform. Below, the black water waited, still and secretive. From somewhere distant, he heard Jake calling his name, concern finally penetrating the evening's recklessness. "Watch this!" Tyler shouted back, though he wasn't sure if anyone could hear him. He took one more step, his foot meeting nothing but air. The sensation of falling seemed to last forever, a moment of perfect, terrifying freedom before the cold water closed over his head. Shock partially cleared his mind, but as he tried to swim, his limbs felt disconnected, refusing to coordinate. The surface, glimmering with moonlight, grew more distant as he sank. Panic surged through him, cutting through the drug-induced haze. His lungs burned. Darkness crept into the edges of his vision. In what he was certain were his final moments, Tyler thought of his mother, and then, strangely, of his father, sitting alone at that massive dining table, waiting for a son who would never come home. Marcus called as the dog broke into a run, nose to the ground, following some scent only he could detect. As they approached the water's edge, Marcus noticed the signs of last night's party, a burned-out bonfire, discarded bottles, a single shoe left behind in haste. Hero paid no attention to these, instead circling near the maintenance structure that extended over the water. That's when Marcus heard it, a faint, weak call for help. Following Hero to the structure, Marcus peered over the edge and saw, to his horror, a teenage boy clinging to a lower support beam just above the water's surface. The boy's face was pale, his lips blue with cold, his strength clearly failing. "Hold on," Marcus shouted. "I'll get help." "Please," the boy gasped, his voice barely audible. "Can't hold on much longer." Marcus looked around frantically. There was no one else in sight, no time to run for help. The emergency call box that should have been at the reservoir's edge had been vandalized beyond use years ago. Making a split-second decision, Marcus scrambled down the slippery metal structure, moving carefully but quickly. Hero whined anxiously from above. "It's okay, I've almost got him," Marcus called back to the dog, trying to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. As Marcus reached the final crossbeam, he could see the boy was barely conscious, his grip loosening by the second. With a final lunge, Marcus grabbed the boy's wrist just as his fingers slipped from the beam. The sudden weight nearly pulled Marcus in two. For a terrifying moment, both boys hung suspended over the dark water. Then Marcus found his balance, bracing himself against the structure's support. "I've got you," Marcus grunted, straining with all his 12-year-old strength to hold onto the older boy. "Can you help me? Try to climb up." The boy's eyes fluttered, focusing briefly on Marcus's face. With what seemed like his last reserve of energy, he reached up with his free hand and grasped the beam. Together, inch by excruciating inch, they managed to get the boy onto the lower platform where he collapsed, coughing and shivering. "What's your name?" Marcus asked, his own arms trembling from the effort. Tyler," the boy stammered through chattering teeth. "I'm Marcus. That's Hero up there," he said, pointing to the dog who watched attentively from above. "Can you climb back up if I help you?" Tyler nodded weakly, and for the next 10 minutes, with many stops and near falls, Marcus guided him back up to solid ground. Once there, Tyler collapsed again, his breathing ragged. "Were you out here all night?" Marcus asked, shrugging off his backpack and pulling out a small emergency blanket his father had insisted he carry. Tyler nodded, his eyes closed. "F fell in, M managed to grab the beam, everyone left, didn't see me." Marcus wrapped the thin blanket around Tyler's shoulders. "You need a hospital, that water's really cold and you've been in it all night." "No," Tyler said with sudden vehemence. "No hospitals, my dad, he'll." His voice trailed off, but the fear in his eyes told Marcus everything he needed to know. Marcus chewed his lip, conflicted. "At least let me take you somewhere warm. You can dry off, get something hot to drink." Tyler hesitated, then nodded. With Hero leading the way, Marcus helped the still unsteady teenager through the gap in the fence and slowly back toward the community garden. By the time they reached the garden shed that served as headquarters for Marcus's makeshift shelter, Tyler was walking more steadily, though still shivering. "It's not much," Marcus said as he unlocked the padlock, "but it's dry." Inside, the small space was neat and organized. One half housed garden tools and supplies. The other had been converted into a simple but functional care station for the dogs. A small electric space heater, plugged into an extension cord that ran to Mrs. Washington's house, provided warmth. "Sit here," Marcus instructed, pointing to the only chair. He turned the heater toward Tyler and dug through a plastic bin, producing a faded but clean towel and an oversized sweatshirt with Westside Community Center printed on it. "These should help." While Tyler changed, Marcus heated water on a small camping stove and prepared instant hot chocolate from a packet. The three dogs in the outdoor kennels watched curiously through the window. "Are those your dogs?" Tyler asked, his voice stronger now as he sipped the hot chocolate. "Sort of," Marcus replied. "I take care of them until I can find them homes. There's a lot of strays in this area." Tyler looked around the small space with new appreciation, noticing the carefully labeled containers of food and medicine, the handwritten charts tracking each dog's progress, the stack of hand-drawn, found dog posters. "You do this all by yourself?" Marcus nodded. "My grandma helps a little, but we don't have much money. My dad's in the National Guard, deployed overseas. It's mostly just me and Hero." He patted the German Shepherd mix, who had settled protectively at his feet. "What happened to his ear?" Tyler asked, gesturing to Hero's missing left ear. "Dog fighting ring," Marcus said quietly. "He was a bait dog when I found him. That was 2 years ago." Tyler winced. "That's messed up." "Yeah, but he's the best dog ever now, helps me find the others, like he found you." For a moment they sat in silence, the only sounds the soft whir of the space heater and the occasional whine from one of the dogs outside. "Thanks," Tyler said finally, staring into his cup. "For saving my life." Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Hero did the hard part, I just followed him." Tyler's phone, somehow still functioning after his ordeal, chimed with an incoming call. He pulled it from his pocket and grimaced at the screen. "Dad." After a moment's hesitation, Tyler silenced the call. "Won't he be worried?" Marcus asked. "He probably just realized I didn't come home last night," Tyler muttered. "Might have even had to cancel a meeting to call." More calls followed, then a barrage of texts. Tyler ignored them all. "Look," Marcus said as he checked on the dogs outside, "I don't know what's going on with you and your dad, but maybe you should at least let him know you're okay." Tyler's expression hardened. "Trust me, he's more worried about how this makes him look than about me. Everything's about the great Richard Harrison's reputation." Marcus froze in the act of filling a water bowl. "Harrison, like Harrison Enterprises." "The one and only," Tyler said bitterly. Marcus set down the water bowl slowly, his mind racing. "Your dad is Richard Harrison, the billionaire?" Tyler rolled his eyes. "Yeah, lucky me, right." For a long moment, Marcus just stared at the older boy, connecting the dots. "I saw him on TV yesterday. They said he gives away millions through his foundation." "Sure, to museums and concert halls and hospitals that put his name on buildings," Tyler said. "All tax write-offs and good PR. You should hear him talk about the right kind of charity that creates lasting value." The last words were delivered in a mocking imitation of his father's deeper voice. Marcus looked around at his humble shelter, then back at Tyler. "Do you think, would he ever help with something like this?" He gestured to the dogs. Tyler followed his gaze, then laughed without humor. "A bunch of mutts in Westside? No way, not prestigious enough, not enough photo opportunities." Marcus's face fell, but he quickly recovered, squaring his shoulders. "That's okay, we manage, but you should still call him." Tyler sighed, then finally nodded. "Fine, but I'm not telling him what happened. I'll just say I crashed at Jake's." As Tyler made the call, a terse conversation that consisted mainly of "yes, sir," and "no, sir," Marcus tended to the dogs, his mind still processing the coincidence. The son of the richest man in the city, rescued by Hero, and now sitting in his humble garden shed. When Tyler hung up, his expression was grim. "He wants me home right away, says we need to finalize arrangements for military school." "Military school?" Marcus echoed. "Is that why you were at the reservoir last night?" Tyler nodded, suddenly looking much younger than his 16 years. "I messed up, again. He's done giving chances." Marcus hesitated, then said, "My dad says second chances are important, and third chances too sometimes." "Yeah, well, not in the Harrison family," Tyler replied, standing up. "I should go, he's sending a car." As they waited at the street corner for Tyler's ride, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Despite the vast differences in their lives, something had connected these two boys in the early morning hours, something beyond the dramatic rescue. "So what happens to this place, to the dogs, if you can't afford to keep it going?" Tyler asked suddenly. Marcus kicked at a stone on the sidewalk. "I don't know. The food's running out and Daisy needs medicine I can't afford. Mrs. Washington lets me use her electricity and water, but she's on a fixed income too. I've been collecting cans and bottles, but it's not enough." Tyler was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his wallet. "Here," he said, extracting all the cash inside, several $100s. "It's not much, but it might help." Marcus stared at the money in shock. "I can't take that." "Sure you can," Tyler insisted. "Consider it payment for saving my life." Before Marcus could protest further, a black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The driver, a stern-faced man in a suit, stepped out. "Mr. Tyler," he said with a curt nod, "your father is waiting." Tyler hesitated, then pressed the money into Marcus's hand. "I'll come back," he promised. "I want to help with the dogs." As the SUV pulled away, Marcus stood on the corner, the cash clutched in his fist, watching until the vehicle disappeared from sight. True to his word, Tyler returned the next day and the day after that. Despite Richard's increased scrutiny and the final preparations for military school, Tyler found ways to slip away to the garden shed for a few hours at a time. With the cash Tyler had given him, Marcus was able to buy medicine for Daisy's ear infection and restock their food supply. But more valuable than the money was the help Tyler provided, his strength for the heavier tasks, his company during the long hours, and his genuine interest in the dogs. "You're actually pretty good with them," Marcus observed on the third day, as Tyler patiently coaxed the timid Penny to take a treat from his hand. Tyler smiled, the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. "They don't judge, you know. They don't care who your family is or how many times you've screwed up." The two boys settled into an unlikely friendship, bridging the vast gulf between their worlds through their shared care for the abandoned animals. For a few precious hours each day, Tyler wasn't the troublesome son of a billionaire, and Marcus wasn't a kid struggling to make ends meet. They were just two boys with a mission. But on the fourth day after the rescue, everything changed. Richard Harrison sat in his home office, reviewing the final enrollment papers for Westridge Military Academy. Tyler's flight was booked for Sunday, just 3 days away. The decision was made, the path set. So why did he feel this persistent unease? A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called, expecting it to be Mrs. Chen with his afternoon coffee. Instead, his chief of security, David Mercer, entered the room. "Sir, we need to talk about Tyler." Richard set down his pen. "What's happened now?" Mercer placed a tablet on the desk and tapped the screen. "Our surveillance team has been tracking his movements as you requested after the last incident. He's been going to a location in Westside for the past 3 days. The tablet showed satellite imagery, zooming in on a small community garden and what appeared to be a shed. "What is this place?" Richard asked, frowning. "It appears to be some sort of unofficial animal shelter," Mercer explained. "Run by a miner, a boy named Marcus Jenkins, 12 years old, lives with his grandmother, father deployed with the National Guard." Richard's frown deepened. "And Tyler is, what, volunteering there?" "It seems so, sir, but there's more." Mercer hesitated, then continued. "We've been trying to piece together what happened the night Tyler claimed to stay at the Sullivan boys' house. According to our sources, there was a party at the reservoir. Tyler was there, but something went wrong." "Wrong? What do you mean wrong?" Richard's voice sharpened with sudden concern. "We're not entirely sure, sir, but based on social media chatter among Tyler's friends and some local rumors, it appears there may have been an accident. Tyler might have fallen into the reservoir." Richard stood abruptly, his face pale. "Fallen in, and no one reported this? Why am I just hearing about it now?" "The details are unclear, sir. The kids scattered when police did a routine patrol. But what we do know is that the Jenkins boy and his dog were seen at the reservoir early the next morning, and shortly after, Tyler was with them." Richard paced the length of his office, his mind racing. "Are you saying this boy rescued my son?" "It's a possibility, sir. We're still gathering information." Richard stopped at the window, looking out over his manicured estate. "And now Tyler is spending time at this boy's shelter?" "Yes, sir, he's there now." For a long moment, Richard was silent, processing this information. Then he turned, decision made. "Bring the car around. I want to see this place for myself." 30 minutes later, Richard's Bentley rolled slowly down the cracked pavement of Westside Avenue. Through the window, he observed a world far removed from his usual surroundings. Small, weathered houses with chain-link fences, corner stores with barred windows, children playing on concrete with makeshift toys. "The garden is just ahead, sir," his driver informed him. Richard nodded, his expression unreadable. As they approached, he could see the garden, a surprisingly well-tended oasis of green amid the urban wear. Beyond it stood a modest shed, and outside, a collection of hand-built dog kennels. And there was Tyler, laughing as he played with a German Shepherd mix, looking happier and more at ease than Richard had seen him in years. "Stop here," Richard instructed, his voice tight with emotion he couldn't name. As the luxury car came to a halt at the curb, Tyler looked up. His smile vanished instantly when he recognized the vehicle. Richard stepped out of the car, acutely aware of how out of place his tailored suit and polished shoes were in this setting. Tyler approached, his posture defensive. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. Before Richard could answer, a young black boy, Marcus, he presumed, joined Tyler, the German shepherd, at his side. "Is that your dad?" Marcus asked, his voice hushed with awe as he took in the expensive car and Richard's imposing presence. "Marcus, this is my father," Tyler said stiffly. "Dad, this is Marcus Jenkins." Richard studied the boy, small for his age, with intelligent eyes and a serious expression that seemed too mature for his 12 years. "So you're Marcus," he said at last. "I understand you've been helping my son." Marcus glanced at Tyler, uncertain. "Yes, sir, he's been helping me too with the dogs." "The dogs," Richard repeated, looking at the kennels. "Yes, I've heard about your operation here." "It's not an operation, Dad," Tyler interjected. "Marcus rescues strays, takes care of them until they can find homes." Richard ignored his son, his attention still on Marcus. "And that one?" he asked, indicating Hero. "He's yours?" "Yes, sir, this is Hero. He's my partner, helps me find the others." Richard nodded slowly. "I see, and was it Hero who found my son at the reservoir the other night?" The question hung in the air. Tyler's face drained of color. Marcus looked down, uncomfortable with the sudden tension. "How did you—" Tyler began. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" Richard interrupted, his voice low and controlled, but with an undercurrent of anger. "You fell into the reservoir during some late-night party with those friends of yours. You could have drowned." "I almost did," Tyler admitted, meeting his father's gaze at last. "But Marcus and Hero saved me." Richard turned back to Marcus. "Is this true?" Marcus nodded. "Hero sensed something was wrong. He led me to the reservoir. Tyler was holding onto a beam under the platform. He'd been there all night." For a moment, Richard seemed at a loss for words, the carefully constructed narrative of his son's latest rebellion crumbling in the face of this new information. "Why didn't you tell me?" he finally asked Tyler. "Would it have changed anything?" Tyler countered. "You'd already decided to ship me off." Richard opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, suddenly aware that they were having this conversation in front of a stranger, a child, no less. "Perhaps we should discuss this at home," he said instead. "No," Tyler replied firmly. "I'm helping Marcus with the dogs today. We're still working on socializing Penny, and Daisy needs her ear checked." Richard's jaw tightened at his son's defiance, but before he could respond, Marcus spoke up. "Mr. Harrison, sir," he said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "I know it's not my place, but Tyler's been a really big help here. Dogs like him, and we got Daisy's ear infection under control thanks to him." Richard studied Marcus again, seeing something in the boy's earnest face that gave him pause. "How long have you been doing this, Marcus, taking in strays?" "About a year, sir. After my dad deployed. I found Hero first, then started noticing other dogs that needed help." "And you do this all on your own?" Marcus nodded. "My grandma helps when she can, and Mrs. Washington lets us use her water and electricity. But mostly it's just me and Hero." Richard looked around the humble setup with new eyes, noting the care and thought that had gone into the makeshift shelter despite its obvious lack of resources. Something shifted in Richard's expression, a subtle softening. "I see. Well, I won't interrupt your work any longer today. Tyler will talk this evening. I expect you home for dinner." "Yes, sir," Tyler replied, surprise evident in his voice. As Richard turned to leave, Marcus called after him, "Sir. Thank you for not being mad at Tyler. About the reservoir, I mean. It was my idea not to tell anyone." Richard paused, looking back at the two boys standing side by side, an unlikely pair united in their concern for abandoned animals. "I'm not mad, Marcus. I'm grateful." The word seemed to catch in his throat. "To both you and Hero." As the Bentley pulled away from the curb, Richard sat in uncharacteristic silence, his mind replaying the scene he'd just witnessed. "Back to the office, sir?" his driver asked. "No," Richard decided. "Take me to the Foundation headquarters. I need to speak with Janet." That evening, Richard and Tyler sat across from each other at the dining table, the familiar distance between them somehow both greater and less than before. "I spoke with the academy today," Richard began, cutting precisely into his steak. "I've put your enrollment on hold." Tyler looked up, fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "What? Why?" Richard set down his knife and folded his hands. "I've been thinking about what happened at the reservoir, about what could have happened." Tyler's gaze dropped to his plate. "I know it was stupid. The pills, the drinking, no, not that," Richard interrupted. "Though yes, that was extraordinarily reckless and dangerous." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I meant what happened after, the fact that you didn't come to me, that you didn't think you could." Tyler remained silent, poking at his food. "When did that happen, Tyler? When did we stop being able to talk to each other?" The question hung in the air between them, heavier than either expected. I don't know, Tyler finally answered. Maybe after Mom died, maybe before. Richard nodded slowly. I've been so focused on your future, on making sure you don't throw away your opportunities, that I haven't been paying attention to what you need now. Which is what? Tyler asked, a hint of his usual defiance returning. I don't know, Richard admitted, but I'd like to find out if you're willing to meet me halfway. Tyler studied his father's face, looking for the familiar signs of disappointment or frustration. Instead, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: uncertainty, and behind it, a genuine desire to understand. Okay, Tyler said simply. I can try. Richard smiled, a small but genuine expression. Good, that's good. He took a sip of water, then added, I'm also interested in learning more about this shelter of Marcus's. Tyler's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Seriously, you are? It seems important to you, Richard replied, and the boy clearly has remarkable determination running such an operation at his age. It's more than determination, Tyler said, warming to the subject. You should see his system, Dad. He keeps records on every dog when he found them, their medical needs, behavioral notes. And Hero is incredible. Marcus trained him to help find other strays. As Tyler continued to describe Marcus's shelter, his passion and admiration evident, Richard listened with growing interest. By the time dessert arrived, a plan was forming in his mind. The next morning, Marcus was surprised to find not only Tyler waiting at the garden gate, but Richard Harrison as well, dressed more casually than the day before, but still conspicuously out of place in pressed khakis and a polo shirt. Good morning, Marcus, Richard greeted him. Tyler thought I might join you today if that's acceptable. I'd like to see more of your operation here. Marcus looked from father to son, confused by this unexpected development, but too polite to refuse. Sure, Mr. Harrison. We were just going to check on a new dog Hero found yesterday. For the next 2 hours, Richard followed Marcus and Tyler on their rounds, asking thoughtful questions and observing the interaction between the boys and the animals. He was particularly attentive to Hero, watching the dog's intelligent responsiveness to Marcus's commands. He's quite remarkable, Richard commented as Hero gently coaxed a skittish stray toward Marcus. And you trained him yourself? Mostly, Marcus replied. My dad helped in the beginning before his deployment. Said Hero had a natural talent for it. Richard nodded, then fell silent again, continuing his observations. By the time they returned to the garden shed, Richard had seen enough. He turned to Marcus with newfound respect in his eyes. What you've built here is impressive, Marcus, especially given your limited resources, but it's not sustainable in its current form, is it? Marcus sighed. No, sir. We're always short on food, medicine costs too much, and the shed's too small for winter. Plus, Mrs. Washington is talking about moving to Florida to live with her daughter. Richard nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that. The Harrison Foundation typically focuses on larger institutional projects, but I believe we could make an exception in this case. Marcus's eyes widened. Sir, I'd like to propose a partnership, Richard continued. The foundation would provide funding for a proper shelter, a real building with adequate facilities, veterinary care, and a budget for food and supplies. You would continue to oversee the operation with appropriate adult supervision, of course. Marcus stared at Richard in disbelief. You want to sponsor my shelter? With conditions, Richard clarified. You would need to formalize your record-keeping system, allow for regular inspections, and complete some basic training in animal care. The foundation would have naming rights, naturally, but you would remain the driving force behind the project. Dad, Tyler interjected, are you serious about this? Richard met his son's gaze. Absolutely. In fact, I was hoping you might take a personal interest in the project as well, as a foundation liaison, perhaps. Tyler's surprise matched Marcus's. Me? You seem to have a knack for it, Richard observed, and it would be good experience in how the foundation operates. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus, finding his voice, asked, Why would you do this, sir? Tyler said you weren't interested in this kind of charity. Richard's expression sobered. Let's just say my perspective has shifted. Sometimes we need to be reminded of what's truly valuable. He glanced at Tyler. And sometimes that reminder comes from unexpected places. As Richard outlined his proposal in more detail, Marcus's initial shock gave way to cautious excitement. A real shelter with proper resources and support could help so many more dogs than his makeshift operation. But there was still a lingering doubt. Mr. Harrison, Marcus said finally, this is amazing, really, but why now? Is it because I helped Tyler? Richard considered the question carefully. Partially, yes. I owe you a debt I can never fully repay, but it's also because I recognize genuine commitment when I see it. You've created something meaningful here, Marcus, something worth supporting. The conversation continued for another hour, details discussed and preliminary plans made. By the time Richard departed with promises to have Foundation representatives visit the following week, Marcus was still trying to process the sudden turn of events. "Did that really just happen?" he asked Tyler as they watched the Bentley drive away. Tyler grinned. "Yeah, it did. And trust me, when my dad commits to something, he doesn't do it halfway." The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity. Foundation representatives arrived, as promised, with architects, veterinarians, and legal advisors. Surveys were conducted, permits discussed, and budgets proposed. Marcus found himself at the center of it all, his input sought and valued in every discussion. When he hesitantly suggested that the shelter include a training program for rescue dogs, Richard not only agreed, but expanded the concept to include community education about responsible pet ownership. "Your insights are invaluable, Marcus," Richard told him during one planning session. "This is your vision we're building upon." Tyler, too, had found a new purpose as the project's unofficial coordinator, bridging the gap between Marcus's practical knowledge and the Foundation's resources. The change in him was remarkable, the sullen, rebellious teenager replaced by a focused young man with a cause he believed in. Even Alois Jenkins, initially skeptical of Richard's sudden interest, was won over by his genuine respect for her grandson's work. "Never thought I'd see the day," she confided to Marcus one evening. "A man like that listening to a boy like you. Maybe there's hope for this world yet." The night before the charity gala where Richard was to receive his humanitarian award, father and son sat together in Richard's study, reviewing the final shelter proposal. "What do you think?" Richard asked, watching Tyler's face as he studied the renderings. "Will it meet Marcus's needs?" Tyler nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "It's beyond anything he could have imagined, Dad. The indoor-outdoor runs, the grooming station, the medical suite. It's perfect." Richard leaned back in his chair, a matching smile on his own face. "Good. I want to announce it tomorrow night at the gala. A new initiative for the Foundation focused on community-based projects. The Marcus Jenkins Canine Rescue Center will be our flagship." Tyler set down the rendering. "He's going to be blown away." "I hope so," Richard replied. "I've arranged for you to bring him and his grandmother to the announcement. The Foundation is sending a car for them." Tyler's smile faltered. About that, I think there might be a problem. I mentioned the gala to Marcus yesterday, and he seemed, I don't know, uncomfortable, said something about not having anything to wear, not belonging in places like that." Richard frowned. "That's easily resolved. We can have something delivered. It's not just that, Dad," Tyler interrupted. "I think he's intimidated by the whole thing. The fancy hotel, all those rich people. It's a different world from what he knows." Richard considered this, then nodded slowly. "I understand. Well, we'll just have to make him feel welcome. Make sure the announcement acknowledges him properly." "Yeah," Tyler agreed, though he still looked concerned. "I hope he comes." The following evening, Richard stood at the podium in the grand ballroom of the Hilton, accepting the City Humanitarian Award to enthusiastic applause. His acceptance speech was brief and gracious, touching on the Foundation's past achievements and future goals. As he neared the conclusion, Richard paused, his eyes scanning the crowd for Tyler, who should have arrived with Marcus and his grandmother by now. But his son was nowhere to be seen. Covering his concern, Richard continued, "And now, I'd like to announce a new direction for the Harrison Foundation, one that focuses on smaller, community-based initiatives that make a real difference in people's daily lives." As he outlined the shelter project, describing Marcus's work without naming him directly, Richard kept glancing toward the ballroom entrance, hoping to see the guests of honor arrive. But as he concluded his speech, returning to his table amid renewed applause, they still hadn't appeared. Richard checked his phone, no messages from Tyler. A sense of unease settled over him. 20 minutes later, as the dinner service began, Richard excused himself and stepped into the hotel lobby to make a call. Tyler's phone went straight to voicemail. Richard was about to call his driver when one of the security team approached him, looking concerned. "Mr. Harrison, sir, there's a situation at the east entrance. A young boy with a dog is trying to get in, claiming he needs to speak with you. Security is handling it, but I thought you should know." Richard's stomach tightened with sudden apprehension. "A boy with a dog? Is it a German Shepherd mix missing an ear?" The security man looked surprised. "Yes, sir." "You know him?" "I do," Richard confirmed, already striding toward the east entrance. "And I need to speak with him immediately." As Richard approached the commotion, he could see Marcus standing his ground against a much larger security guard, Hero at his side. The boy's face was flushed with emotion, his clothes damp. It had started raining outside. "Would be dead if it wasn't for Hero," Richard heard Marcus saying. And now he's trying to shut down our shelter. Richard froze, confusion washing over him. Shut down the shelter? What was Marcus talking about? The security guard's radio crackled. Jenkins to control. I've got a situation at the east entrance. Young trespasser with a... At that moment, Richard's eyes met Marcus's across the ballroom. For a heartbeat, they simply stared at each other, the billionaire philanthropist and the determined young boy who had saved his son. That's him, Marcus whispered to Hero. That's the man who wants to take everything away. The security guard tightened his grip on Marcus's shoulder. That's it. You're coming with me. Stop, Richard called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the watching guests. Let him go. He's here at my invitation. The guard hesitated, then released Marcus. Richard approached slowly, aware of the curious stares from the gala attendees. Marcus, he said quietly, what's happening? Where are Tyler and your grandmother? Marcus's chin lifted defiantly. Tyler's at the hospital with Grandma. She fell this afternoon. He's been trying to call you. Richard pulled out his phone, checking it again. I haven't received any calls. He said it kept going to voicemail, Marcus replied. But that's not why I'm here. I came because of this. He thrust a folded paper toward Richard. Richard took it, unfolding it carefully. It was a legal notice, bearing his company's letterhead, informing Marcus that the property where his makeshift shelter stood had been purchased by Harrison Enterprises and would be cleared for development within 48 hours. I don't understand, Richard said, genuinely bewildered. I didn't authorize this. It has your signature, Marcus pointed out, his voice trembling slightly. Right there at the bottom. Richard examined the document more closely. The signature did indeed resemble his, but something was off about it. This isn't my signature, he said finally. Someone's forged it. Marcus's expression was skeptical. Then why did your company lawyers deliver it? They said all the dogs had to be gone by Monday or animal control would take them. Richard's confusion turned to anger as the pieces fell into place. Mercer, he muttered. It has to be. He turned to the security guard who was still hovering nearby. Find David Mercer. Tell him I need to see him immediately. As the guard hurried off, Richard guided Marcus to a quiet corner of the lobby, away from curious onlookers. Hero followed, watching Richard warily. Marcus, I promise you I knew nothing about this, Richard explained. The shelter project is still going forward exactly as planned. Marcus looked uncertain. Then why politics? Richard interrupted grimly. Corporate politics. Mercer must have learned about the shelter project and decided it interfered with other plans. He's done this sort of thing before, making executive decisions without my direct approval. Before Marcus could respond, David Mercer appeared, his expression carefully neutral. You wanted to see me, sir? Richard held up the notice. Explain this, David. Mercer glanced at the paper, then at Marcus, before returning his attention to Richard. Ah, yes, the West Side acquisition. A routine property purchase for the new tech campus, all perfectly legal and above board. Except that I specifically told you last week that the community garden was to be preserved for the Foundation's new shelter project, Richard countered, his voice dangerously calm. Mercer's composure slipped slightly. With all due respect, sir, that was a preliminary discussion. The tech campus has been in planning for months. The contracts were already drawn up. Contracts which apparently required my forged signature, Richard asked pointedly. Mercer paled. I wouldn't call it a forgery, sir, more of an expedited approval. Given your recent distraction with personal matters, I thought it best to move forward with our established plans. Richard's eyes narrowed. You thought it best, he repeated. Tell me, David, when did you decide you were running my company? The tension between the two men was palpable. Marcus watched, wide-eyed, as Richard Harrison transformed from the cordial philanthropist he'd come to know into something far more formidable, the ruthless business titan whose reputation preceded him. Consider this your termination notice, Richard said coldly. Security will escort you from the building immediately. Your access to all company systems is revoked as of this moment. Any attempt to access company property or communications will be treated as corporate espionage and prosecuted accordingly. Mercer's face contorted with shock, then anger. You can't do this. I've been with the company for 15 years. I've protected your interests. You've protected your own interests, Richard corrected him. And you used my son's situation as cover for your scheme. That's unforgivable. With a gesture, Richard summoned 2 security personnel. Escort Mr. Mercer out and make sure it is notified immediately. As Mercer was led away, still protesting, Richard turned back to Marcus. I'm sorry about this, Marcus. Truly, the shelter is safe, I give you my word. Marcus nodded slowly, still processing the dramatic scene he'd just witnessed. Tyler was right, he said finally. When you commit to something, you really do go all in. Richard smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. Speaking of Tyler, we should get to the hospital. How is your grandmother? She's okay, Marcus assured him. Just a sprained ankle. The doctor wanted to keep her for observation because of her blood pressure. Good, I'll have my driver take us there immediately. Richard paused, glancing at Hero. Is he allowed in my car? He's gotten rather wet in the rain. Marcus grinned. Hero goes where I go, sir, but he's pretty good about shaking off first. Richard chuckled. Fair enough. Let me just make a quick announcement to the gala attendees, and then we'll go. Returning to the ballroom, Richard approached the podium once more. The room quieted as he prepared to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the interruption. A family emergency requires my immediate attention. But before I go, I'd like to make a brief introduction. He gestured toward Marcus, who stood uncertainly at the ballroom entrance with Hero. This is Marcus Jenkins, the remarkable young man behind the Foundation's newest initiative that I mentioned earlier. At just 12 years old, he's built a community animal rescue operation that has saved dozens of abandoned dogs. And recently, he saved something even more precious to me, my son Tyler's life. A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd. The Marcus Jenkins Canine Rescue Center will break ground next month, Richard continued. But its real foundation was laid a year ago when a boy with limited resources but unlimited heart decided that every abandoned animal deserved a chance. That's the kind of initiative the Harrison Foundation is proud to support. Applause filled the ballroom as Richard stepped away from the podium. As he joined Marcus at the door, the boy looked up at him in amazement. You named it after me? He asked, his voice barely audible over the continued applause. Richard nodded. It seemed only fitting. Now let's go find Tyler and your grandmother. Now back to where we started. The confrontation at the gala entrance had been resolved, the misunderstanding cleared up, and a new partnership formed between the unlikely trio of a billionaire, his son, and a boy from Westside with his one-eared dog. 6 months later, on a bright spring morning, a small crowd gathered for the grand opening of the Marcus Jenkins Canine Rescue Center. The modern facility stood on the site of the old community garden, now expanded to include the adjacent vacant lot. Solar panels lined the roof, and a state-of-the-art medical suite occupied one wing. Indoor and outdoor runs provided space for up to 30 dogs, while a training area and education center completed the complex. Marcus, dressed in a new button-down shirt and khakis, a compromise between his usual casual wear and the formal attire his grandmother had initially suggested, stood nervously beside the ribbon that stretched across the main entrance. Hero sat at his side, remarkably dignified despite the festive bandana around his neck. Eloise Jenkins, recovered from her sprained ankle and beaming with pride, sat in the front row of chairs alongside Mrs. Washington, who had postponed her move to Florida to see the project completed. Richard and Tyler Harrison stood on Marcus's other side, both looking genuinely pleased with the occasion. The past months had seen a remarkable transformation in their relationship. The military school plans permanently shelved, replaced by Tyler's active involvement in both the shelter project and a new youth outreach program sponsored by the Foundation. As Mayor Wilson concluded her speech about community partnerships and urban renewal, she turned to Marcus. And now, I believe young Mr. Jenkins has a few words for us. Marcus swallowed hard, stepping up to the microphone that had been adjusted to his height. Thank you, Mayor Wilson, and thank you all for coming today. He glanced down at the note cards in his hand, then set them aside. When I started taking care of strays in the neighborhood, I never imagined anything like this. I just knew they needed help and I could give it. My dad always taught me that if you see someone who needs help, even if it's a dog, you help them. That's what community means. Marcus looked over at Richard and Tyler. Sometimes help comes from unexpected places, and sometimes one small act can start something bigger than you ever imagined. He gestured to the facility behind him. This center isn't just for the dogs, it's for our whole neighborhood. We'll have adoption days and training classes and a program where kids can read to the dogs to help them socialize. My grandma's going to teach a senior volunteer program, and Tyler's starting a youth group for teenagers who want to learn about animal care. Marcus's voice grew stronger as he continued. What I've learned from all this is that everyone has something to give, and everyone has something to learn, even billionaires. This last comment drew appreciative laughter from the crowd, including Richard himself. So thank you all for believing in this project and in me. Now, who's ready to meet some dogs? With that, Marcus turned and cut the ribbon. The doors swung open to reveal the bright, welcoming lobby of the center, where the first 10 rescue dogs waited in their new, comfortable quarters. As the crowd filed in, exclaiming over the facilities and cooing at the dogs, Richard placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Well done, Marcus. Your father would be proud." Marcus smiled, thinking of his dad, who was due to return from deployment in just 2 weeks. He's going to be surprised, that's for sure. "I have something for you," Richard said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Marcus. "Consider it a grand opening gift." Marcus opened the envelope curiously. Inside was a certificate naming him the official director of the Marcus Jenkins Canine Rescue Center with a modest but meaningful salary attached. "You're hiring me?" Marcus asked, wide-eyed. Richard nodded. "With your grandmother's permission, of course. You'll have adult supervision and guidance, but the vision, that's all yours." Tyler joined them, grinning. "And guess who your assistant director is going to be?" Marcus looked from father to son, momentarily speechless. Then he turned to Hero, who sat patiently at his feet. "Did you hear that, boy? We're official now." Hero's tail thumped against the ground in what seemed like approval. As the celebration continued around them, Marcus found himself thinking about the chain of events that had led to this moment. A stray dog with a missing ear, a midnight rescue at the reservoir, a confrontation at a charity gala, and now, a dream realized beyond anything he could have imagined. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the most unlikely beginnings led to the most extraordinary journeys. And sometimes, the best way to find your own path was to help others find theirs, even if those others happened to have 4 legs and a tail. Or, in some cases, $1 billion and a corporate empire. As Hero leaned against his leg, a silent reminder of where it all began, Marcus Jenkins looked out at his new domain, not just a building, but a community of people and animals, all connected by the simple, powerful act of caring. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments.